Hello, my name is Dr. Adam Rapoport, and I am the Medical Director of Palliative Care at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm also the Medical Director of Emily's House Children's Hospice, the only pediatric hospice in Toronto, Canada. And I am an Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics, as well as the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Toronto. And I'm going to speak to you today about management of emotional and behavioral symptoms in children as part of good pediatric palliative care. Truth is, I really love this topic, and the reason is that emotional and behavioral symptoms is really something that cuts across all aspects of palliative care. I want you to take a moment, and imagine somebody that you know in your life that has had to deal with a serious illness. Maybe it's a friend, a family member, maybe it's even yourself. And I want you to think about how that illness affected them. For sure, you know about things like physical problems, issues maybe that brought them to seek medical attention. But let me ask you, how did their serious illness impact them emotionally? How did that illness impact them behaviorally, how they acted? I guarantee if you think about it, they were impacted in some way. And that's because it's impossible for human beings to be impacted by a serious illness and not have it take its toll on our emotions or on our behaviors. And that's why I think this subject is so important. If pediatric palliative care is all about improving quality of life and minimizing suffering, then we need to pay attention to all of the domains of quality of life and suffering, including the emotional impacts and the behavioral impacts. Some of the common things that we see in children, some of the issues that we need to focus on are anxiety and worry, depression, sadness, or being withdrawn. Irritability is a common problem in children that are dealing with serious illness, confusion, fatigue. And again, you can just imagine that all of these issues can be relevant no matter what the underlying medical problem is. For all of these things, we want to take a coordinated approach, a really systematic approach to do a proper assessment, think about some of the medical issues that can be causing these problems, think about the psychological issues, maybe environmental issues that may be impacting things. Sometimes these things can be related to treatments, or they can be part of syndromes. Many of the things that we need to consider. And these are things that we go through in detail as part of this in particular EPEC module. But the part that I like most about this module is the focus on communication. And the reason is that often the child is, the forgotten partner in all this. The child themselves, brothers and sisters. And it's amazing how much we can address and how well we can address emotional and behavioral symptoms by sitting down and simply communicating with the children that are being affected. To include them in this, give them a chance to ask their questions, see what they might be worried about, and address those fears and concerns. And all of a sudden you can see there can be a weight lifted off their shoulders. Let me give you an example. I often like to talk and teach about how do we talk about serious illness, death, dying, worries with children, be that the child that's sick themselves or brothers and sisters? Well, I like to keep things pretty simple, and to me it's all about three main steps. The first thing is you want to invite the child to ask questions, and when they do, you need to praise them for doing so. Wow. What a great question. I'm so glad that you asked me this. What that does is it creates an environment where the child feels safe and that they can ask anything that they want. Now be careful, some children don't even know where to get started. It's very unusual for a healthcare provider or an adult to have one-on-one space with them and allow them to just open up and ask anything that they want. So sometimes if I have a child that's maybe a little bit more shy or doesn't know where to get started, I'll say things like, would you like to know what other children who've been in similar situations have asked me? And then I slowly ask little bits of questions, getting deeper and deeper into the harder ones. I always let the child know that they're in full control. If they want to know the answer to the question, I'm happy to tell them. If it's not a question that they've been thinking about, then we don't have to talk about that today. But mostly I want to reassure them that I'm always going to be honest and open with them and that everything's on the table. So again, step one, I'm going to praise that child for asking questions and open the door to get them to ask as many as they want. Step two is to try to understand the question behind the question. For example, one child once asked me, is cancer contagious? There can be a lot of reasons why a child might be asking that question. Or something like, is heaven a real place? Try not to make assumptions about what that question is really about. In fact, what I like to do, and you can only get away with this with children, is I usually like to respond with a question of my own. And I say, wow, what a great question. That's a real hard one. Tell me, is that something that you've been thinking about? What's been on your mind? Why is that something that you're wondering? Get them to speak a little bit more about it so that you can understand what is it that they're really after so that you can answer the direct question you have. Sometimes when we make assumptions about what a child is asking, we can take things in a direction that they don't really mean to go in. And the key is to give kids the opportunity to ask questions, to give ourselves the opportunity to answer their questions, but only focusing on the things that they want to. So step one, praise them. Step two, find out that question behind the question. And step three is then answer the questions. That often involves clarifying any misconceptions. You'd be surprised how much children overhear but don't fully understand. I would say quite a bit of the time when I hear the questions that are worrying kids or making them sad, there's actually factual information that I can give that clears up some of those misconceptions, and that can make things go away. The other thing is, though, don't be afraid to be honest. It can be hard. It can be really difficult when kids ask very hard questions like, what happens if my disease doesn't get better? Am I gonna die? You know, I always think that there's nothing wrong with leaving the window open for hope. None of us are here to destroy hope, but we do want to be open and honest with them. And I always will say honestly with a child, I'm very worried about what's happening. It sounds like you're worried too. And it's a possibility that those things may happen. Of course, the child may be sad when they fully understand these things, but that's because a very sad thing is happening. That's okay. Other things that I really like to focus on when talking about emotional and behavioral symptoms in children, I think that we can do a lot by making sure that they have some basic information. And so even when kids aren't asking me directly, I will always try to cover what I call the 6 C's and the 3 W's. What are the 6 C's? Well, the first one is called. What's it called? We always want to make sure that children understand that their illness has a name. We want to give them the proper language to talk about it. Most kids are just taught to say sick, but we're all going to get sick. Mom's going to get sick, dad's going to get sick. We want kids to understand that this sickness is different than other sicknesses. Similar to that, we want to answer the question, is this something I can catch? Especially after COVID, children are very aware that illness can be spread from person to person. If it is something that is contagious, we want to explain that it is, and we want to talk about the measures that can be taken to keep those around us safe. But most serious illnesses in children that are receiving palliative care are not contagious. And we want to help kids know that they cannot pass this on to their loved ones or friends, and it's not something that they can get if they're hanging around somebody else that has a serious illness. The next C is cause. Did I cause it? A lot of children think very egotistically. The world is centered around them. We want to make sure that kids understand that there was nothing they did to cause their illness, and most likely nothing that somebody else did. Sometimes there's just mysteries in the world and we don't understand it. Sometimes we do have an understanding and we can explain it to the child. The next C is cure. Can I cure it? Kids often believe that they have the power to fix things, that everything is inside of them. And we want to help children understand the treatments that are being given to the child to help make them feel better, possibly to cure the illness, but that it is not in their power alone to do those things. The next C is care. Who is going to take care of me? This is an opportunity to let the child know that they're never going to be alone, that the people that love them most are always going to be there with them by their side, and that they are here either at the hospital or at the hospice or somewhere else in the community with experts that are always going to be there to care for them no matter how things are going with the illness. And the final C that I always like to mention to children is connect. How can I stay connected with the people I love? Especially true for children in hospital, where they're away from their support network, their friends, their family, their teammates. You know, we live in 2024 in this hyper-virtual world where we have FaceTime and other ways of connecting, WhatsApp, and we always want to make sure that kids can stay connected with the people that care most about them. Don't forget those 3 W's: wishes, wonders, and worries. I love to ask children, you know, if you had one wish, what would you be hoping for right now? It's amazing what kind of insight you can get to how they're feeling and what they're thinking about. Is there anything that you're wondering about? And is there anything in particular that worries you right now? Always ask that. There's amazing things that we can do to address worries. And if you're not comfortable with it, there's always people that can help.